Cowboy accepted an Apache woman as payment, then found out she was the chief's only heir wild. Jack Dalton wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned against the wooden railing of his small ranch. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but Jack barely noticed. His mind was tangled in worry. Past year had been harsh on him. Cattle had died from disease, crops had failed from the summer drought, and debts had piled up like a wall he could not climb. He had spent his life working hard, believing that honesty and determination would see him through, but now it seemed that luck had abandoned him completely. Every creak of the windmill, every distant cry of a coyote reminded him of how fragile his life on the frontier could be. That evening, a group of traders rode slowly up the dirt path leading to his ranch. Jack recognized them immediately. Men he had trusted once, men who now owed him a significant sum of money. Their horses kicked up dust as they approached, and Jack felt a chill of unease. He had dealt with stubborn men before, but these traders were known for their tricks, for bending the rules until the truth was almost unrecognizable. He grabbed his worn hat and stepped forward, trying to look confident, though inside he felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. "Even Dalton," said one of the men, his voice smooth but carrying an edge that made Jack wary. "We hear you've been waiting for your payment." Jack's jaw tightened. "You owe me for 6 months of cattle delivery." "That's no small sum," he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "I need my payment now." The traders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The tension was heavy in the fading light. Finally, the oldest among them, a man named Calloway, spoke. "Jack, we don't have the cash. Times have been rough. But maybe we have something else to offer you." Jack raised an eyebrow, suspicion creeping into his mind. "Something else?" he asked, his voice wary. "I don't take toys or trinkets. I need real payment, Calloway." "You know that." Calloway hesitated, then nodded toward the shadows at the edge of the group. Out of the dim light stepped a young Apache woman. Her posture was proud, her eyes sharp and full of curiosity, and her dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders. She moved with a quiet strength, unlike anyone Jack had ever seen before. "This woman," Calloway said, gesturing to her, "can be your payment." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He stepped back, not out of fear of her, but because the offer was so strange, so shocking. He had heard stories of the Apache people, their bravery, their fierce loyalty, their tight-knit tribes, but he had never expected to be offered a human being as payment. His mind raced. Could this be legal? Could it be right? And most importantly, what would he do if he accepted? The woman said nothing, her dark eyes steady on Jack. There was no fear in her gaze, only a calm intelligence, as if she understood the conversation better than anyone else in the group. Jack studied her carefully. She was young, perhaps in her late teens, but her presence was powerful. Something in him stirred, a mixture of awe, caution, and an inexplicable curiosity.
I don't know what to say, Jack muttered, rubbing the back of his neck.
"I've never been in a situation like this. I can't just accept a person as payment."
"It's the only way we can settle our debt, Jack. She is offered freely, and she will be treated fairly."
"But it's not like we're forcing her. She has a choice." Jack's mind whirled. The idea of accepting a person, even if offered freely, went against everything he had ever believed. But he also knew his ranch might not survive another season without payment. He looked at the young woman again, breath. Her gaze did not beg, did not plead.
It was quiet, almost challenging, as if daring him to make the choice.
After a long silence, Jack spoke. If I agree, I swear I will treat her with respect. She will not be a servant or a worker. She will have her freedom and her dignity. Do you understand me? Calloway nodded slowly. That is all we ask.
We have no wish to cause harm. Jack took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing on him.
Finally, he extended his hand to the woman. Will you come with me? He asked, his voice gentle. For a moment, she studied him. Then she nodded. Without another word, she stepped forward, and Jack offered his arm to guide her. She accepted, not as a victim, but as a companion in this uncertain new chapter. Jack felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension.
He had made a choice, and now the consequences would unfold in ways he could not yet imagine.
As they rode back to the ranch, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. The air was filled with the sounds of the frontier, the low hum of insects, the rustle of the wind through the grass, the distant calls of night birds. Jack glanced at the young woman sitting silently beside him. She had not spoken a word during the journey, yet her presence was commanding. He sensed that she had a story, a life, and a strength that went far beyond what he could see. That night, as they settled into the small cabin on the ranch, Jack offered her food and water. She ate quietly, her movements graceful and deliberate. Jack tried to make conversation, but she answered with careful, measured words, revealing little about herself. He respected her silence, understanding that trust could not be rushed. Over the following days, Jack began to realize that this young woman was unlike anyone he had ever met. She had skills and knowledge that went far beyond simple ranch work. Death. She observed the land, the animals, and the routines of the household with a sharp, intelligent eye. When Jack asked for her help with chores, she performed each task efficiently and with precision. More than that, she carried herself with a quiet dignity, never allowing anyone to see her as weak or inferior. Jack found himself both challenged and intrigued by her. Her presence was a constant reminder that life was full of surprises, that people were more complex than appearances suggested. He began to see her not just as someone he had accepted as payment, but as a human being with thoughts, feelings, and a story that deserved respect. One evening, as Jack sat by the fire, he thought about the deal that had brought her to his ranch. It had seemed simple at first, a transaction to settle a debt. But now he realized it was far more complicated. There were responsibilities, moral questions, and unknown dangers that he had not considered. He could not imagine returning her to the traders, nor could he ignore the possibility that her presence might provoke conflict with her people. Yet, despite the uncertainty, Jack felt a strange sense of hope. He had survived many hardships in his life, and this was simply another challenge, though unlike any he had faced before. He knew that how he treated this young woman and how he navigated the days ahead would define him in ways he could not yet understand. That night, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the trees, Jack Dalton felt a mixture of fear, responsibility, and curiosity.
He did not know what the future held, but he was determined to face it with integrity and courage.
And the young woman, whose name he had yet to learn, seemed to understand that they were beginning a journey together, one that would change both of their lives forever. The frontier was harsh, unforgiving, and unpredictable.
Yet, for the first time in many months, Jack felt a spark of purpose. He realized that life's value was not measured only in cattle or money, but in the people one met, the choices one made, and the respect one earned.
Brash. And as he closed his eyes that night listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, he knew that the decision he had made would mark the start of an extraordinary story, a story of trust, courage, and the unexpected consequences of a simple, shocking deal. Life on the ranch settled into a cautious routine after the first tense days. Jack Dalton had expected difficulties, but nothing had prepared him for the presence of Ayanna. She was unlike anyone he had met, quiet, strong, intelligent, and unafraid. From the very first morning, it became clear that she would not simply fit into the role he had imagined for her. She observed the ranch with careful attention, noting every detail of the land, the animals, and the work that Jack performed daily. Her eyes, dark and focused, seemed to miss nothing. Jack watched her closely as she began her tasks. She fed the horses with gentle patience, cleaned the barns efficiently, and even showed an unusual ability to calm the nervous calves. Jack had always prided himself on managing the ranch alone, but Ayanna's skills were extraordinary. More than that, she moved with a quiet confidence, never rushing, never faltering, and never asking for praise. Jack felt a mix of admiration and unease.
How could someone so young and unfamiliar with this harsh world appear so capable?
"Where did you learn to do all this?" Jack asked one morning as she worked near the fence. He was careful to keep his tone casual, but the question had genuine curiosity behind it. Ayanna paused and looked at him with a calm, steady gaze. "I have watched my family, my people," she said simply. "We'll learn from life around us." Jack nodded slowly, impressed. Her words were simple, but there was a depth to them that he could feel, even if he did not fully understand. He realized that she had grown up in a world very different from his own, a world that valued survival, observation, and strength in ways that were foreign to him. And yet, she seemed to adapt easily to his world, learning quickly and understanding without being told. Days turned into weeks, and the routine on the ranch continued. Jack began to notice small things about Ayanna that fascinated him. She had a natural intuition about the land, knowing when the cattle would stray or when a storm was approaching. She moved silently and confidently through the fields, and when she spoke, her words were measured and thoughtful. Unlike other people Jack had met, she did not waste energy on idle chatter or complaints. Every action, every word, seemed to have purpose. Despite her quietness, there was a warmth in her presence that Jack could not ignore. Sometimes, in the evenings, they would sit together by the fire after the day's work. Jack would speak about his life, the struggles of running the ranch, and the dangers of the frontier. Pain. Ayanna listened intently, occasionally offering advice or observations that surprised him with their insight. Jack began to feel a connection he had not expected, a bond built on respect and mutual understanding. At first, Jack had thought of Ayanna simply as someone he had taken in, a responsibility he had accepted out of necessity. But over time, he began to see her as a person in her own right, a partner in survival, not a servant. He respected her independence, her quiet strength, and the way she carried herself with dignity. And Ayanna, in turn, seemed to recognize Jack's honesty and fairness. She did not trust easily, but she began to let him into her world, showing him glimpses of her personality and intelligence. But one morning, while checking the fences, Jack noticed Ayanna examining the soil carefully, pressing it between her fingers and looking thoughtfully at the crops. "You know a lot about farming," he said, leaning on the wooden post. "I never imagined you'd take an interest in it." Ayanna looked up, her eyes steady and clear. "I watch and learn. Life teaches us if we pay attention. Every plant, every animal, every day has lessons, breaths." Jack smiled, realizing that she spoke not just about farming, but about life itself. There was wisdom in her words that went beyond her years, and he felt a growing respect for her knowledge and insight. He wondered what other lessons she had learned in her life, and what secrets she might still be keeping. As the days passed, Jack also noticed Ayanna's interactions with the animals. The horses, which had always been skittish around strangers, seemed to sense her calm energy. They responded to her touch and voice in ways they never had with him alone. Even the cattle, which could be stubborn and difficult, followed her quietly when she guided them. Jack realized that she had a connection with the natural world that he could not explain. It was as if she understood the rhythm of life on the ranch in a way he never had. Life on the ranch, however, was not without its challenges. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm swept across the land, turning the dirt paths into mud and driving the animals into a panic. Jack struggled to round up the frightened cattle, but the storm was relentless. To his surprise, Ayanna remained calm. She moved through the chaos with precision, guiding the animals with quiet authority. Breaths. Jack watched her work, amazed at her courage and skill. By the time the storm passed, not a single animal was lost, and the ranch was largely unharmed. Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration for her. Through these experiences, Jack began to understand that Ayanna's presence on the ranch was more than just helpful. She brought balance, wisdom, and a perspective he had never encountered before. He realized that he had misjudged the situation at first, thinking he had merely accepted someone as payment. In truth, he had gained a person whose intelligence, courage, and resilience would change the way he lived and worked. Evenings became moments of quiet reflection for both of them. They would sit near the fire, talking about the land, the animals, and the world beyond the ranch. Ayanna shared stories of her people in careful, measured ways, never revealing too much but offering enough to spark Jack's curiosity.
He listened intently, fascinated by the differences and similarities between their worlds.
Breaths, and slowly, a sense of trust grew between them. Jack felt that she had chosen to share her knowledge with him, and he treated every story, every lesson, with respect. Jack also began to see the quiet strength of her character in small, everyday moments. She did not complain when work was hard or when the weather was harsh, but she treated everyone with fairness and respect. Whether it was the animals, the workers on the ranch, or Jack himself, her patience and understanding were remarkable, and Jack found himself learning from him. One afternoon, Jack caught himself smiling as he watched her tend to the fields. He realized that life on the ranch, which had seemed so bleak and lonely, was beginning to feel different. There was hope, a sense of purpose, and a connection that he had not known before. Ayanna's presence had brought not only skill and knowledge, but also a quiet light into the often harsh and unforgiving world he inhabited. Despite the growing bond between them, Jack remained cautious. He knew little about her past, her family, or the world she had come from. There were questions he dared not ask, mysteries he could only guess at. And yet, he also understood that pressing her too much could break the fragile trust they were building. He decided to be patient, to let her reveal her story in her own time. As the seasons changed, the ranch began to thrive once more.
Crops grew stronger, the cattle multiplied, and Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. Ayanna continued to play a central role, not as a worker or a servant, but as a partner, guiding and advising him with quiet wisdom.
The bond between them grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Jack Dalton realized that accepting Ayanna as payment had been a decision that would change his life forever. What had seemed at first like a shocking and difficult choice had turned into an opportunity for growth, learning, and connection. And although he did not yet know the full story of her past, he understood that her presence was a gift, one that would shape the future of the ranch and perhaps his own life in ways he could not yet imagine. Evenings on the ranch were now filled with conversation, shared work, and quiet reflection. Jack found himself appreciating the simplicity and depth of life in a way he never had before. He had learned that true strength lay not in wealth, power, or brute force, but in understanding, respect, and the courage to face life's challenges with integrity. And Ayanna, with her quiet strength and wisdom, had become both a teacher and a companion in this journey, guiding him toward a future that was unpredictable, but full of possibility. Jack Dalton could not have imagined, as he watched the sunset over the rolling fields, that the decision to accept a stranger as payment would lead to such profound change. Yet he knew one thing for certain. Life on the ranch would never be the same, and neither would he. With patience, respect, and courage, he and Ayanna would navigate the challenges ahead, discovering that true partnership could emerge in the most unexpected ways. Narration. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm, but Jack Dalton could sense that something was shifting beneath the surface. Ayanna had become more than a companion in work. She had become a part of the ranch itself, a presence whose wisdom and strength were woven into every daily task. Yet there was an air of mystery about her that Jack could not ignore. She spoke carefully about her past, revealing little, and always seemed to carry a quiet weight in her eyes. It was as if she had lived through experiences far beyond her years, and Jack often found himself wondering what secrets she might be keeping. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the rolling fields, a scout from a nearby settlement rode up the dusty path to the ranch. Jack had seen the man before, a wiry figure named Silas who often traveled between towns, carrying messages and news. Right. Silas approached Jack with a sense of urgency that made the cowboy uneasy. "Evening, Dalton," Silas said, pulling his horse to a stop. "I've got news that might concern you." Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling a knot of apprehension form in his stomach. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Brace." Silas glanced around as if to ensure no one else was listening, then leaned closer. "It's about the woman you took in, Ayanna." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What about her?" Silas hesitated, choosing his words carefully.
I've heard stories from travelers, traders, and scouts moving through the territory.
"They say she is not just any Apache woman. She is the only heir of her tribe's chief, Brish." Jack felt as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He took a step back, his mind racing to process the information. "The chief? You mean her father?"
If what I've heard is true, she is the only one who can inherit leadership of her people. That makes her very important.
You need to be careful, Dalton. Her tribe will want her back, and they may not be gentle in reclaiming her.
Breath. Jack ran a hand over his face, trying to calm the sudden storm of thoughts. He had accepted Ayanna as payment, thinking he was simply taking in someone in need. Now, he realized that he had unwittingly taken on something far greater, something that could bring danger to himself, the ranch, and Ayanna. He felt a mixture of guilt, fear, and awe. The woman he had come to respect so deeply was more than he had ever imagined, a key figure in a world he barely understood.
That evening, as the ranch settled into its usual quiet, Jack approached Ayanna with caution.
He did not want to alarm her, but he knew that honesty was necessary. They sat by the fire in the small cabin, the flames flickering and casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Something I need to tell you," Jack began, his voice low. "I've heard things about you. Travelers say you're the only heir of your tribe's chief. Is it true?"
Ayanna looked into the fire, her face calm but unreadable.
For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she spoke. "It is true," she admitted. "My father is the chief, and I am his only child. I have kept it hidden because the world I was born into is dangerous. There are people who would seek to control or harm me if they knew my identity." Jack listened carefully, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that her silence and caution were not signs of mistrust, but of survival. She had navigated a world that demanded vigilance, and she had chosen to trust him in her own way. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Jack asked gently. "I want to help you, but I need to understand the truth." Ayanna looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I needed to be certain that you would treat me with respect, that you would not see me as property or a prize. You have proven that, through your actions, not just your words. That is why I trusted you enough to share this now." Jack felt a mixture of relief and determination. He had always known that life on the frontier was unpredictable, but he had not anticipated the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He realized that protecting Ayanna was no longer a matter of simple morality, it was a matter of survival and honor. Over the next few days, Jack and Ayanna worked quietly to prepare for any potential visitors from her tribe. They reinforced the fences, ensured the cattle were secure, and made plans for escape routes if necessary. Ayanna's calm presence guided Jack through each decision. She was fearless in her approach, her mind sharp and strategic. He marveled at her ability to assess danger and plan accordingly. Despite the looming threat, there were moments of normalcy. Ayanna continued to assist with daily chores, teach Jack lessons about the land, and share small stories about her people and their customs. Each day, Jack grew to understand the depth of her knowledge and the strength of her character. He realized that she was more than a survivor. She was a leader in her own right, even if her tribe did not yet know it. One afternoon, a group of travelers arrived at the ranch. Jack's heart raced as he recognized a few of them as members of neighboring settlements. They spoke in hushed tones, exchanging glances that suggested they had heard the rumors about Ayanna as well. Jack quickly assessed the situation, deciding to maintain calm and avoid confrontation. He introduced himself politely and invited them to rest, all while keeping a watchful eye on Ayanna. The travelers were respectful, but their questions were probing. They asked about Ayanna's background, her family, and her life before arriving at the ranch. Jack answered carefully, revealing only what was safe and true, while Ayanna remained silent, her gaze steady and composed. She did not flinch, did not panic, and did not betray fear. Jack felt a surge of pride. Her courage was unwavering, even in the presence of strangers who might have posed a threat. That night, after the travelers had left, Jack and Ayanna sat together in quiet reflection. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow across the fields. Jack realized that their bond had deepened through this ordeal. They had faced uncertainty and danger together, and in doing so, had learned to trust each other completely. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met," Jack said softly, breaking the silence. "Not just physically, but in spirit." "I don't know how you do it." Ayanna smiled faintly, a quiet expression of understanding and resilience. "Strength comes from knowing who you are and what you must protect. I have learned to survive, to lead, and to endure. That is all I can do." Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply within him. He realized that the responsibility he carried was not only to protect Ayanna, but also to honor her strength and her identity. She was no longer just someone he had accepted as payment. She was a person of importance, a leader in her own right, and a symbol of resilience and courage. As the days passed, Jack and Ayanna continued to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with her tribe. They trained together, strengthened the ranch, and developed strategies to ensure safety. Each day, Jack grew more certain of one truth. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them alongside Ayanna, respecting her decisions and supporting her with every ounce of his strength. The revelation of Ayanna's identity had changed everything. Jack realized that life on the ranch was no longer just about survival and work. It was about loyalty, courage, and the bonds that connected people across cultures and worlds. He understood that their journey together was far from over and that the choices they made in the coming days would shape not only their lives, but the lives of those around them. Jack Dalton had accepted a deal without fully understanding its consequences. Now he faced the reality of that decision with clarity and determination. The young woman who had arrived at his ranch as a form of payment was, in truth, a powerful force, and protecting her was both an honor and a duty. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he was part of something far greater than himself. And as he looked at Ayanna, sitting calmly beside him by the fire, he realized that their lives were intertwined in ways he had never imagined. The challenges ahead would be difficult, the dangers real, but he knew that together they could face whatever came. She was not just the chief's heir. She was a guide, a teacher, and a partner in a world that demanded courage and wisdom. Jack Dalton understood for the first time that life on the frontier was not just about surviving the land, the weather, or the hardships of daily work. It was about understanding people, respecting their strength, and facing the unknown with integrity and courage. Ayana's presence had changed him, and he knew that their story, one of trust, bravery, and unforeseen responsibility, was only just beginning. The news of Ayana's identity spread faster than Jack Dalton could have imagined. Traders, travelers, and scouts whispered in towns nearby about the young woman who had come to his ranch. Jack could feel the tension building in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on every decision he made. He knew that sooner or later her people would come for her, and he needed to be prepared. The frontier was unforgiving, and mistakes could cost lives. Theirs, the ranch hands, or even innocent bystanders. Ayana, however, remained calm. She moved through the ranch with her usual quiet confidence, observing the land, the cattle, and Jack himself. Despite the looming danger, she never showed fear. She had faced threats before, threats that demanded careful thought, courage, and strategy. Jack often found himself marveling at her resilience. The more he observed her, the more he realized that she was not only the chief's heir, but also a natural leader. Her wisdom, patience, and ability to read people made her a force that could not be underestimated. One morning, Jack noticed her standing at the edge of the field, staring into the distance. He joined her, squinting against the rising sun. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Ayana turned to him, her eyes steady and calm. "I am thinking about my people. They will come looking for me. We must be ready, but we must also find a way to avoid bloodshed. Violence will not help anyone." Jack nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. He knew that she was right. The arrival of her tribe could easily turn into a violent confrontation if they believed she had been taken against her will, and yet he also knew that her people's arrival was inevitable. The question was how they would face it, with diplomacy, strategy, or force. Over the next few days, Jack and Ayana worked tirelessly to prepare. They reinforced the fences, secured the cattle, and made sure that everyone on the ranch understood the importance of remaining calm and alert. Ayana taught Jack how to observe subtle signs of movement in the distance, how to listen for the faintest sounds that might indicate approaching riders. She explained the ways her people communicated, the signals they might use, and the patterns of their scouts' grasp. Jack listened intently, grateful for her knowledge, realizing that the safety of the ranch depended on it. At the same time, they practiced strategies for negotiation and defense. Jack had spent much of his life handling disputes with neighbors and rival ranchers, but Ayana's approach was different. She emphasized patience, understanding, and communication. "We must show respect," she told him one evening as they studied the map of the surrounding land. "They are my people. They must see that I am safe and respected. If we act with honor, we can prevent unnecessary violence." Jack absorbed her words, understanding that this was not just about protecting Ayana. It was about learning from her, trusting her instincts, and respecting the wisdom she carried. He realized that the frontier was not only a place of survival, but also a place where courage, patience, and diplomacy could save lives. Then, one late afternoon, the sound of hooves echoed across the distant hills. Jack's heart raced as he saw a group of riders approaching. Their movements were deliberate, coordinated, and unmistakably skilled. These were not ordinary travelers. They were warriors. Ayana stood beside him, her posture calm and commanding, as she assessed the approaching group. "They are here," she said softly, her voice steady. "Stay calm." Breaths. Let me speak with them first. Jack swallowed hard, trusting her judgment. He had learned by now that she knew her people far better than he ever could. The riders drew closer, their expressions serious yet not overtly hostile. Ayana stepped forward to meet them, her head held high, her eyes meeting theirs without fear. The leader of the group, a tall man with a strong presence, spoke in a commanding tone. Ayana, daughter of Chief Waya, we have come for you. You belong with your people.
Ayana nodded respectfully. I know, she replied.
But I have been safe here, and I have learned much about the world beyond my tribe. I ask that you trust me and my judgment. I am ready to return, but I seek peace, not conflict. The tension was palpable as Jack watched the exchange. He felt a mix of fear, respect, and admiration. Ayana's words were measured, calm, and wise. She was asserting her identity while preventing violence, a delicate balance that required courage and intelligence. The warriors listened intently, their expressions softening as they recognized the truth in her voice.
After a long pause, the leader spoke again. If what you say is true, daughter of Waya, we will not harm the people here.
But you must come with us and lead our tribe as your father would wish. Ayana nodded, understanding the responsibility that awaited her. I will return, she said. But I ask that my friend, Jack Dalton, be respected. He has acted honorably and has protected me. No harm shall come to him or his ranch. The leader glanced at Jack, assessing him. Then, with a slight nod, he turned to his warriors. We honor your request, daughter of Waya. Let peace guide our actions.
Jack exhaled slowly, feeling a wave of relief.
The confrontation had been resolved not through violence, but through respect, understanding, and the courage to speak the truth. He realized that Ayana's leadership had prevented what could have been a devastating conflict, saving lives and preserving the ranch he had worked so hard to protect.
Over the next few days, preparations for Ayana's departure began.
Jack worked closely with her, ensuring that the transition would be smooth. They organized supplies, mapped out safe routes, and coordinated with the warriors to prevent any misunderstandings. Throughout it all, Ayana remained calm, her strength unwavering, guiding Jack and the ranch hands with quiet authority.
During one quiet evening, as they sat by the fire, Jack turned to her.
I don't know how you do it, he said. You have the strength to lead your people, to face danger, and to guide others. I've learned more from you in these weeks than I have in years on this land. Ayana smiled faintly, a gentle acknowledgement of his words. Strength comes from responsibility, observation, and courage. You have shown these qualities as well, Jack. You protected what was important, and you treated me with respect. That is not always easy in this world. Brasat. Jack felt a profound sense of respect and admiration for her. He realized that their bond had deepened far beyond trust or friendship. They had faced uncertainty, danger, and difficult decisions together, and in doing so had forged a connection that neither could ignore.
When the day finally arrived for Ayana to leave with her tribe, Jack accompanied her to the edge of the ranch.
The sun rose over the hills, casting a golden light across the land. The warriors waited patiently, their expressions serious but respectful. Ayana turned to Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude and strength. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. You have taught me that trust and courage can cross worlds, and that honor is worth protecting. I will not forget this place nor the man who treated me with respect. Jack nodded, his own emotions a mixture of pride, sorrow, and hope.
Take care of yourself, Ayana. Lead your people well, and know that you always have a friend here.
She gave a small bow, then mounted her horse. The warriors followed, and together they rode away, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. Jack watched until they disappeared into the distance, feeling a sense of completion and awe. The ranch was quiet once more, yet something had changed within him. He understood that life was unpredictable, that choices carried weight far beyond what one could see, and that true courage was not only about facing danger, but also about acting with respect, honor, and wisdom. Ayanna had shown him the strength of leadership, the power of diplomacy, and the value of trust. He knew that her influence would remain with him, shaping his decisions and his understanding of the world. In the days that followed, Jack returned to the ranch with a renewed sense of purpose. He repaired fences, tended to the cattle, and worked the fields with a new perspective. The lessons he had learned from Ayanna, patience, courage, and respect, guided his every action. And though the ranch was quieter without her presence, he carried the memory of her strength and wisdom in his heart, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason. Jack Dalton had faced one of the most challenging situations of his life and emerged wiser, stronger, and more aware of the responsibilities that came with every decision. Depend about one chapter, but also the beginning of a new understanding. That true leadership, courage, and honor could appear in the most unexpected ways, and that the bonds formed through trust and respect could endure even across distance and time. Life on the ranch returned to its quiet rhythm after Ayanna departed with her tribe, but Jack Dalton felt the absence of her presence deeply. The fields were the same, the cattle grazed as before, and the wind still rustled through the tall grass, yet there was a subtle emptiness in the air. Jack had grown accustomed to her steady guidance, her wisdom, and her calm confidence. Now he realized that she had left an impression on the ranch, and on him, that would last far longer than the days they had shared. Though Ayanna was gone, the lessons she had taught remained vividly in Jack's mind. He approached each task with greater patience, planning his days carefully, and observing the land and the animals with a sharper eye. He remembered her words about strength, patience, and understanding, and he found that these lessons were not just about surviving the frontier, but about living fully, with respect for others and the world around him. Jack began to see his ranch not merely as a place to work, but as a space of life, growth, and community. Visitors and travelers who passed by noticed a difference in the way Jack managed the ranch. The animals were healthier, the crops stronger, and the land seemed to thrive under his care. When neighbors asked him for advice, he shared not only practical tips, but also the wisdom he had learned from Ayanna. He spoke of patience, observation, and the importance of understanding those around you, whether people, animals, or nature itself. His reputation grew, and people began to respect the ranch not just for its success, but for the thoughtful and fair way it was run. Jack also thought often of Ayanna and her tribe. He wondered how she was adjusting to life back among her people, taking on the responsibilities of leadership. He imagined her guiding her tribe with the same calm intelligence she had shown on the ranch. Though he missed her presence, he took comfort in the thought that she was fulfilling her destiny and using her gifts to make a difference. One morning, as Jack tended to the fields, he noticed a group of riders approaching from the horizon. At first his heart raced, fearing that trouble might be coming. But as the riders drew closer, he recognized the familiar faces of some of Ayanna's warriors. They approached the ranch with respect and greeted Jack warmly. "Jack Dalton," said the leader, his voice steady. "Ayanna sends her greetings. Desperate, she wishes to ensure that the alliance between her tribe and your people remains strong. Back. She speaks of you often and wants you to know that your honor and fairness are remembered."
Jack felt a surge of pride and relief.
Even from afar, Ayanna's presence continued to shape his life. He realized that their connection had created a bridge between two worlds, the frontier settlers and the Apache tribe, one built on respect, trust, and understanding. The warriors stayed for several days, helping with ranch work and sharing stories of their journeys and traditions. Jack listened attentively, fascinated by their knowledge and the ways they viewed the land. He began to understand more deeply the values that guided Ayana's people: community, respect for nature, and the courage to act with integrity. These visits reinforced the lessons he had learned from Ayana and strengthened the bond between their worlds. As the months passed, Jack continued to thrive on the ranch, guided by the lessons and example of the young woman who had once arrived as an unexpected payment. He managed his cattle and crops with care, treated neighbors and travelers with fairness, and remained alert to the challenges that life on the frontier could bring. Yet, he did all of this with a new sense of purpose and perspective. He had learned that strength was not measured by force alone, but by wisdom, respect, and the courage to make difficult decisions. Jack also found himself reflecting on his personal growth. He had come to the frontier as a man who relied on hard work and determination, but who sometimes acted without fully considering the consequences of his actions. Through his experiences with Ayana, he had learned the importance of patience, observation, and humility. He realized that leadership was not about dominating others, but about guiding, supporting, and protecting those around him. These lessons shaped not only the way he ran the ranch, but the way he lived his life. In quiet moments, Jack would sit by the fire in the evenings and think about the path that had brought him here. He remembered the day he had accepted Ayana as payment, the uncertainty and fear he had felt, and the way that simple decision had transformed his life. What had seemed at first like a shocking and difficult choice had become a turning point, a lesson in courage, trust, and human connection. He understood that life was full of unexpected opportunities and challenges, and that true growth came from facing them with integrity and an open heart. One day, as he worked in the fields, Jack noticed a young boy from a neighboring settlement watching him from the edge of the property. The boy seemed curious, perhaps a little shy, but eager to learn. Jack called him over and began to teach him some of the skills he had refined over the years: caring for the animals, tending the crops, and observing the land. As he worked with the boy, he realized that this was another way to honor the lessons he had learned from Ayana, by passing on knowledge, guidance, and respect to the next generation. Jack's ranch became a place of learning and growth, not only for the boy but for others who came seeking guidance. People who had once viewed the frontier as a harsh and unforgiving land began to see it as a space of opportunity, cooperation, and understanding. Jack's reputation as a fair and wise man spread, and he became known not only for the success of his ranch but for the respect and care he showed to all those who crossed his path. Though Ayana was no longer physically present, her influence was everywhere. Brackets. Jack could see it in the way the land flourished, in the way the animals responded to his care, and in the respect he earned from others. He realized that her lessons were not just temporary guidance, but enduring principles that would shape his life for years to come. Years later, Jack would often recall the moments they had shared on the ranch, her quiet strength, her wisdom, and the courage she showed in facing both the unknown and the inevitable challenges of life. He understood that their time together had been a rare gift, an encounter that had transformed him and taught him to see the world with a deeper understanding and greater compassion. One afternoon, Jack received a message from one of Ayana's warriors, delivered with care and respect. The note contained words from Ayana herself.
Jack Dalton, you have shown honor, courage, and fairness beyond what I could have hoped for.
Breaths. Know that the bond we formed is remembered, and that the respect and trust we share will endure. Lead your life with integrity, and know that your actions have made a difference. Round, in desperate, Jack held the note close, feeling a sense of connection across the distance. He understood that even though their paths had diverged, the impact of their time together would continue to guide both of them. Ayana's leadership, wisdom, and courage had left a lasting mark, not only on her tribe but on the man who had learned from her. In the quiet evenings on the ranch, Jack would sometimes look out across the fields and imagine the future. He thought of the boy he was teaching, of the travelers passing through, and of the Apache warriors who had once stayed on his land. He understood that life was a series of choices, connections, and lessons, and that each encounter had the potential to change the course of one's life. Jack Dalton had begun his journey on the frontier as a man struggling to survive, uncertain of what the future held. Through his experiences with Ayanna, he had discovered courage, wisdom, and the power of human connection. He had learned that respect, patience, and understanding could prevent conflict, build alliances, and create lasting change. And though the world remained unpredictable and often harsh, he faced it with confidence, knowing that he was guided by the principles he had learned from the young woman who had entered his life in the most unexpected way. As the seasons continued to change, Jack Dalton's ranch flourished, becoming a symbol of resilience, respect, and the enduring lessons of courage and trust. He carried Ayanna's influence with him in every decision, every act of care, and every interaction with the world. Their story of an unlikely encounter, unexpected responsibility, and the power of understanding across worlds became a quiet legend among those who knew them, a tale of honor, wisdom, and the lasting impact of human connection. And though Ayanna would continue to lead her people, and Jack would continue to guide his land and community, the bond they had shared remained unbroken. Across distance and time, their lessons endured. That courage could be quiet, strength could be measured in wisdom, and respect and trust could bridge even the widest divides. In the heart of the frontier, two lives had intersected, changed, and grown together, leaving a legacy of honor, understanding, and hope that would be remembered for years to come.